today we're going to move on from the first section of the course, which was discussing the basics of supply and demand and how markets reach equilibrium, to the next part of the course, which is trying to understand what's behind these demand and supply curves. So we just sort of arbitrarily drew these supply and supply curves. We roughly told you what they meant, but that shouldn't be very satisfactory here at MIT. We want to sort of understand the basic principles behind things. And so what we're going to do now in the next two sections of the course is help you understand what's behind the demand curve and the supply curve. And so we're going to begin over the next few lectures by talking about consumer theory, or what is behind the demand curve. And then we'll turn and talk about producer theory, or what goes into understanding the supply curve. So today we're going to talk about consumer theory and how consumers make decisions and how those consumer decisions lead to the demand curve that we've been working with so far in the class. Now, our model of consumer decision making, if you recall from the first lecture, we talked about a model which featured utility maximization. Utility maximization, the idea being that we're going to have a model with two key components. The first is going to be the consumer's preferences for different goods and services. So the preferences when faced with a choice of goods, of which goods they'd like to buy. And the second being the consumer's budget constraint, which is we know what they want, but given their resources, what can they afford? So basically, the strategy in this section of the class, the consumer theory section of the class, is going to be to ask, given the resources you have available, what bundle of goods makes you best off? So given the resource you have available, what bundle of goods makes you the best off? So we're going to do this in 3 steps, okay? Step 1 is we're going to discuss how we think about, in economic modeling, how we think about consumer preferences. What are our underlying consumer preference assumptions that help our models work? Step 2 is we're going to talk about mapping those preferences into a utility function. We're going to take the preferences and map them into a utility function. Those are the 2 steps we'll do today. So preferences are just what are the sort of underlying axioms of personal preferences. Then how do we mathematically map those preferences into a utility function? And then finally, the 3rd step is we'll talk about budget constraints. That is, how do we model the constraints on individuals as they make these decisions? Today, we're going to start just with the first 2 of these, and we're going to ignore the 3rd. So today's the fun day. There's no budget constraints. Today, we just talk about how consumers think about what they want, and we're going to totally ignore what they can afford. This is just what you want. How do you think about what you want as a consumer? How do we model your preferences? Next time, we bring in the constraints. That's less fun. But today, we just talk about how you think about your preferences and what you want.